Now, governors are telling businesses when they can reopen, but it's up to the business owner whether to open or not. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow says that businesses with the option to open right now should not be liable if customers or workers contract coronavirus after they reopen. Let's bring in Andy McCarthy, Fox News contributor and former assistant U.S. attorney. And Andy, this caught my eye yesterday that Larry Kudlow said that, of course, representing the White House, and Dan McLaughlin, one of your co-writers and colleagues at National Review, basically saying that more lawsuit protection for these businesses means faster reopenings, but that lawmakers would have to make some of these changes. And I wonder what you think about this.
Dana, I think that there's a case to be made for immunity from suit for businesses, especially if we want to encourage them to reopen. I'm very suspicious of the idea of a sweeping one, and this seems to me to be the sort of thing that's why we have congressional hearings before we do this kind of legislation. No one wants to see the businesses subjected to frivolous lawsuits under circumstances where they're following good business practices and someone who works for them contracts the disease. On the other hand, I think people would be uncomfortable with the idea of immunity if a business were forcing its employees or coercing them to engage in behaviors that were likely to up the spread of the disease. So I think that's all got to be worked out. But I think it's the right thing. It's the right direction. It's just, there's got to be some limitations on it.
It's a complex issue. The other issue I wanted to talk to you about is this idea of the contact tracing and the surveillance kind of feeling that it gives to some people. Listen to Governor Newsom of California about what he's planning in his state.
We in the state of California have a long history of testing and tracking and tracing patients. The history of TB, measles. We'll get an aggregated data set that will allow us to track the trackers and track the tracing.
All right, Andy, I think that this is well-intentioned, but there are some legal concerns. Your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of legal concerns with all of this stuff across the board, Dana, and I think we could do a lot better on this if we just got the burden of proof right. If we remembered in every one of these instances where we have fundamental rights rubbing up against something the government's entitled to regulate, like preventing the spread of infectious disease, if we were to remember that the default condition is we have our fundamental rights and that it's the government's burden to show that a restriction that they want to impose is rationally related to public health and is something that needs to be done in order to blunt the spread of the disease, I think we'd be in a lot better shape than what we have now, which is like the assumption by these governments that their regulation is what has priority, and we all have to kind of adjust our expectations about our fundamental rights to what they think is necessary or essential.
Yeah. We know that Apple and Google are working on that app, and that's private sector and is voluntary. But what if your employer requires you to download the app before you can come back to work? Would you have to do it?
Well, that would be a condition of your employment. I think that's very different than if the government were to coerce you to do it. I think if an employer wants to require that as a condition, it's a private employer, that seems okay to me. What I'd be more concerned about is the government, warehousing this information and using the surveillance for purposes other than public health. And I think you could be assuaged in a lot of that if you didn't have governors saying things like, well, gee, the Bill of Rights is above my pay grade. They need to show that
when
they
Governor Murphy said
they're
that,
being solicitous of our rights. Yep. My governor. I think he's doing a very good job, by the way, but I just think that was a... Yeah, well, there was a tin-eared thing to say. He's doing a very good job, but yeah.
I don't think it's what he intended, but yes, you're right. A bad line. All right, Andy McCarthy, always great to have you. Thank you.